So I want to make a video on the short that I basically just put up on my YouTube channel about basically if you're treating somebody who's got like a mental disorder or retarded or whatever word you want to use, more like they're more retarded, you're conditioning them in a sense to act that way. So I kind of want to. I had a whole video in that, but I put that segment because I got to thank you, and it made my nipples hard. So um, basically, like what I want to say on that is like in a more coherent way because I had a video, but I want to be more coherent. I put better thoughts, but could put it back down a little bit better. Um, so where should I start? So like, check it, bro. Let's say you got labeled as somebody who's I don't know autistic, or you're a little bit on the spectrum or something, right? And you know, now, let's say your idea of being on the spectrum, you got to treat them a little bit differently. Now they're not as capable as much things. Um, I don't want to put somebody I know on blast, but there's somebody I know who's close to me, and uh, he's my homie. He's closer than that. He's actually blood related. I don't want to put him on blast like that. But when I notice when I'm at his house and stuff like that, right? He suffered from brain damage. You probably don't know who you are if you're watching this, but he suffered from a little bit of brain damage. He had this accident a while ago, and he is labeled on the spectrum. Apparently, that's what I was told growing up, and all this stuff, right? And if you talk to him, you might think that, but the thing is, what I realized with him is he's actually really fucking smart. And to show me how smart he is, a lot of times he'll talk about his comic books and all these things. He could just go into great detail, stuff you would think somebody who's autistic or something would be into, which I could go into more a little bit later. Um, but he is really smart. You know what I'm saying? He's very intelligent. Then I don't know where he's at socially now. He could be better than before, but before he was very socially like not good socially. You know what I'm saying? Like talk a lot. And I love him. But he talk a lot. He couldn't see when people like, okay, it's a time to talk, when not to talk, this, that, and the third, right? So you might think he's kind of slow, right? And I noticed too, like when he lives with his mom and stuff like that, they also kind of have this idea that he's slow. He's got brain damage or whatever, this, that, and the third. So without them really consciously know it, they're also going along with that idea that that's the case. And now the case might be he might actually have some of that. But I realize is like the way they treat him, or they might even put conditions on him, like, oh, he might not be able to do this. Oh, I don't know about him because he's kind of on the spectrum and this, that, and the third, da da da. So they have less faith because of this title that was basically given to him, and the perceptions, the cognitive perceptions that most people have around that title, like being on the spectrum or something. You think you gotta like take care of them all the time, and they're like fucking stupid and retarded. So I have like a good story with that, right? So like my brother, he never flew. Um, and now again, I want to say my brother is actually really smart. He's none of those things. But the doctors would lead you to believe, right? They lead you to believe, and rightly so, especially if you had some brain damage or whatever. But I remember prime example. I was living out in L.A. and I was like, I wanted him to come out, and he's never flown by himself before, and he was scared shitless, right? Is and like that's something you wouldn't think he could do. I'm even talking to another family member, and they're like, "Oh man, this, that, and the third," and he was scared, right? But then he ended up doing it, and then he had to fly back, and it was easier. And then he did it a second time because he came out again, and it was cakewalk. It was a cakewalk after that, and then he could fucking do it. So my point is with that is basically is like when you put limitations on other people, and some words can be very limiting, labels can be very limiting, because a lot of times when you label somebody, you're putting this perceived meaning onto them, and essentially putting them into a box, and you can get them to believe it as well. You know what I'm saying? But like if I listen to other people trying to tell me like, oh well, I don't know if he can do that and this, that, and the third, and blah 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 blah, but I knew that he could, and then he could, and then it was easy. It goes to show me it's just like, well, clearly he can learn a lot more things than people think that he can, but it's hard for them to think that he can, because they already have this kind of image in their mind of what he's capable of. And no, sure, they know that he can do other things, but he's slow, this, that, and the third. He needs this, that, and the third. And maybe he does, but maybe it's also the conditioning around said person or other people that also makes them slower. Like somebody has autism or some shit like that. And then you kind of create an environment where you're always trying to keep them safe. You're not trying to really get them to like learn from practical experience. You know what I'm saying? You can almost put them in this box where you and them believe that they have a fucking issue or a problem, and then they almost seem more like baby like. You almost start you treating them like a baby. Now, not to say that there isn't people that are like mentally like, you know I don't even like saying ill, because God is like what, because you don't think or coherent as the normal human that would go into the schooling system. You know what I'm saying? But some people need to be taken care of. It's true. But what I'm saying is that maybe they can do a little bit more, and you're taking away a lot of their agency a lot of the times when you think that they can't. And when you put like labels like autism and stuff like that, or they have this or that, a lot of these have like a stagnant to them. You know what I mean? Or like, um, you have certain things like ADHD and all this type of stuff. Um, there's always more to it. Even like schizophrenia, like, which is to me is just like you are much more sensatorily aware of telepathical thoughts, spirits, and all this type of stuff. But that stuff is crazy to the intellectual mind that's only grew up with science and has been conditioned with mainstream Western science. You know what I mean? It hasn't gone out of their own way with their own life experience to actually pay attention in a different way. They are already like we are already instituted in the schooling systems, within the government, within all these things, to point our focus to look and perceive things in a certain way and light. So if somebody has autism, or if they have some sort of disorder, like they like to call it, I don't call autism a disorder. I think those things are called disorders, like ADHD. He can't pay attention. He can't pay attention in this school system that is basically institutionalized, where we force all kids to go into and force them to learn these subjects that they don't really give a fuck about. Oh, it's weird. I just don't understand why he just can't pay attention. There must be something wrong. They must have a disorder, because they just can't seem to get it together and force themselves to give a fuck about something they don't give a fuck about. So it's like we're already conditioned to believe like these are disorders and all this stuff, and it gets put a negative connotation on it, especially in the Western world. And then these people, they grow up thinking that they have something wrong with them, and they're trying to like fix themselves and shit. You know what I'm saying? And you can go maybe to another society and another culture with that same quote unquote disorder, and then all of a sudden you fit in perfectly. But then maybe you're crazy because you want to go live in a third world or something like that, where you fit in perfectly from the so-called disorder that you have. So, and it's the same thing with people in the streets as well. You know what I'm saying? A lot of the times, like these people, like if you live in Seattle, or a place where you see a lot of homeless people or people on drugs that are yelling, and they're just like, ah, a lot of the times what they want is love. They actually just want attention, because they already know that most people that pass them by on the street see them as vermin and as a scum. And then if they don't care about me, then why the fuck should I give a fuck about how they feel? I don't give a fuck about keeping these streets clean. Why should I give a fuck if nobody out here gives a fuck about me? You know what I'm saying? So it kind of creates this cycle, and then we basically say that there's some sort of issue and all this type of stuff, when really what it is just built up trauma. It's just built up trauma. So that's why I like to be very careful and just like kind of look a little bit deeper into like the meaning of why this is happening, and why this is that, and why we call people that, and trying to have a little bit more understanding for what someone's going through, and not just kind of labeling it this, that, and the third. I think the labeling part is a really good, easy, quick way to kind of just like, oh, this explains this, because we need to know everything all the time. It's like I had to stop watching videos on like narcissism and stuff like that, because I noticed when I was watching videos on that, it almost put me in this kind of um like defense kind of mode, and I gotta watch out for narcissism, and I gotta watch out for being manipulated. It was almost like I was looking for it when I'm like watching that stuff. You know what I'm saying? So like I don't think it's smart, like, calling like, if you're really trying to like build and have better relationships personally, like calling your parents narcissistic, which they might be. You know, they might have narcissistic tendencies. You might have narcissistic tendencies. I think a lot of people, especially in America, have narcissistic tendencies. Have you ever been on Instagram? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's all, you've been on Tinder. It's so more about the flesh than it's ever been before. You know what I mean? It's more about the flesh than it's ever been in the history of the world. I'm assuming. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, but when you're like throwing that out there and you're trying to put them under the bus and do this, you're basically, you're like almost taking away their humanity. You're almost like you're labeling them into this one small category, and they're this, they're this. You know what I mean? It is what it is.